Hey everyone, before we begin, I just wanted to make a quick disclaimer. You may notice that my audio is a bit more echoey compared to previous videos. Well, that's because, as many of you likely know, I recently moved, and I'm still in the midst of figuring out my new audio setup. As such, my audio is going to sound a bit different for the next couple videos. I'm going to do what I can to fix it as soon as possible, but please bear with me in the meantime. Also on that note, since I now have a new avatar design, I felt it was time to spice things up a little bit in another way. With that said, cue the new intro. So I'm gonna start this off with a bit of a confession. I've never been much of an Xbox guy. Growing up in the 2000s, I was far more of a Nintendo kid and somewhat of a PlayStation kid. And whenever I did hear classmates or friends talk about the Xbox consoles, it was always Halo this, Call of Duty that, the kind of games I had zero interest in. Now looking back in retrospective, it wasn't 100% that. The Xbox consoles did have their fair share of stuff that would have appealed to me. But for basically all my adolescent years, the way everyone around me talked about Xbox didn't make me want to get one, let alone try Microsoft's games. Nowadays, I still don't have any Xbox consoles, but with several of Microsoft's first-party endeavors getting ported to PC and occasionally to other consoles, I've had a chance to try some of their games out, and especially now that Microsoft is branching out a bit more with the kind of games they publish, largely thanks to the buyouts they've been doing, but details, their first-party endeavors have been generally more appealing to me compared to before. But even with all that in mind, Hi-Fi Rush still felt like a total curveball. Now granted, there are some other factors at play for that feeling. It was developed by Tango Gameworks, a studio previously known entirely for more realistic-looking horror games. It was surprise revealed during an otherwise standard Xbox Direct, and then released later that same day, and as I'll go more into later, it overall feels like a game that would have come out back on the GameCube or PS2 or, well, original Xbox. It just didn't seem like something that come out from a first-party studio in 2023. But believe me, you will not hear me complaining. Okay, actually on that note, I'm gonna just get straight to the point. I absolutely loved this game. It took me some time to get around and play through it, but when I finally did, what an awesome time it was. I'll be honest, a good chunk of this review is likely gonna be me just gushing, so I apologize in advance. Actually, no, scratch that. I'm not apologizing for expressing my love for a fantastic game. With that said, this is still a review, so let's tackle it as such. Quick note before we begin though, there will be story and gameplay spoilers in this review, so you have been warned. With that said, let's rock. So the game centers on Chai, a laid-back slacker who aspires to be a rock star, but likely has been held back by his disabled arm. Oh yeah, it's not gone into in-game, but the game's director John Johannes did confirm that Chai doesn't have full functionality in his arm, which suddenly adds more emotional weight to a conversation that occurs later on.
Says Rockstar here. Do you even actually play guitar?
Well...
Figures. I'll talk.
Oof. But yeah, Chai aspires to be a rock star, but can't. So the solution? Get a cybernetic arm, of course. And it just so happens that leading tech corporation Vandalay Technologies is in the midst of accepting applicants for Project Armstrong, a test program for cybernetic limb replacement. So Chai gets on board with this real quick. But seconds before the operation begins, Chai's MP3 player, which had been grabbed and thrown away by CEO Cale Vandalay during a tangent of his, ends up on his chest. This results in the MP3 player becoming part of his cybernetics, which in turn labels him a defect. Something Vandalay's very dead set on preventing, with an emphasis on dead.
Your security tried to kill me! Project Armstrong, EULA. Fine print. Should've read it, punk. Defects get recalled!
Luckily for Chai, the MP3 player ends up powering his robot arm in some rather unique ways. In particular, his arm's magnetic grabber stick, originally meant for garbage collecting, now takes up bits of scrap to form a guitar-like weapon, giving him something to fend off Vandalay's forces with. During his attempted escape, he ends up meeting 808, a robot cat created by a mechanic named Peppermint, who's trying to dig up info on supposed secret plans that Vandalay have. Through 808, she helps Chai escape long enough to meet him in person, and she convinces him to, begrudgingly I might add, help her out. And it's through their reluctant alliance that they discover what Vandalay's up to. Turns out, Vandalay's been working in secret on a mind control AI called Spectra, and Project Armstrong was all just a means to get people like Chai under Spectra's control through their new cybernetics. The only way to shut it down is by using the passkeys in the possession of each of Vandelay's executives, including Kale himself, so Chai and Peppermint set off to take down each of the company bosses to get their passkeys and shut down Spectra before it can be used for mass mind control. Along the way, they gain additional allies for their cause, namely Macaron, Vandelay's former head of research and development, Cinnamon, Macaron's psychology robot partner, and Corsica, Vandelay's current head of security, and the only executive who was kept out of the loop about Spectra's true nature, since Kale didn't trust her. Once she realizes the truth of what's going on though, she joins our heroes team. Well, that and our heroes save her life once Kale tries to kill her when she knows the truth, but minor detail.
Oh, and for you, Corsica, you're fired.
Corsica, watch out!
Fired? Oh, no, should have used the flamethrower. Alright, well, there's always next time.
So yeah, the game's story is a pretty straightforward, take down the evil corporation kind of plot, but what really helps carry it is its characters and writing. Hi-Fi Rush has a very solid cast of characters, both on the hero and villain side of things. To start, we've got Chai, our self-proclaimed future rock star. Now Chai does start off as quite self-centered and often comes off as abrasive and rude.
Small meaning just you and your cats? I'm bigger than this. You're sounding even more suspicious than Vandelay.
Ugh, Chai, just...
You know what? Don't care. I'm out of here after this anyway. Oh well, I guess your whole get to Rekka's office without her knowing plan is shot.
Thanks to you.
Hey, who is doing all the hard work here?
It wouldn't be so hard if you just listened to me to begin with.
Sometimes unintentionally so, I might add.
Or are you just too oblivious to figure that
Oh,
out?
come on.
That's it. Now I'm mad.
Wait, what does oblivious mean?
But even with those traits of his, he's enjoyably witty and dorky rather than annoying or unlikable.
Mr. Chai, was it? That's Mr. Chai to you.
That's what I just called you.
Okay then. Oh, no one will see me coming as I sneak into this trap.
You made it backstage, Chai. Where are you?
I'm on my way to the stage, dressed as a shark. Ask me anything.
And he does grow as a person as the story goes on.
Hey, we all got our problems. Can't say I made a good first impression either.
Guess we learned a lot from each other.
We kind of sanded down each other's sharp edges, I guess.
He's a really likable protagonist with a simple but satisfying character arc. Same goes with the friends he makes along the way. Peppermint starts off as rather snarky and short-tempered, but like Chai, she grows as a person, opening up more to her teammates as the story progresses. Which, given just how personal this mission of theirs is for her, there's a lot to open up about. In a nutshell, as revealed partway through, she's the daughter of Vandelay's original CEO, Roxanne, and Kale is her older brother, who basically hijacked the company from their far more benevolent mother and made it the evil corporation it currently is, something Peppermint takes immense issue with.
You liar. That's not what happened. She did all the hard work. You stole it.
The other members of the team don't get quite the same level of character arcs, but they're all still quite charming and likable regardless. Macaron is a shy and gentle giant, initially wanting to avoid fighting altogether.
Oh no. Does that mean I have to fight?
I believe it does, sir.
Fight you.
But he makes for a good moral support and voice of reason for the team, and is willing to put up a fight to help his friends. Cinnamon is more so a comic relief, being an exceedingly blunt psychology robot, but he does have some pretty consistently funny inputs.
I'll be right back. Cinnamon is trying to give me a personality test. Unsympathetic? Hot-headed? You don't even know me.
You are only proving me correct. Oh, Mr. Chai, you have quite a view of the exhibit.
Cinnamon, why are you the only one enjoying this?
It's exciting and educational. Mr. Chai, I like this game.
And his whole shtick of rapid drawing expressions on his otherwise blank state face never ceased to be entertaining. And I already went somewhat into Corsica earlier, but even when working under Vandelay, she was by far the most reasonable and level-headed of the executives, being the only one of them who genuinely wanted to make a positive change. And her knowledge on Vandelay's inner workings end up helping the team a lot once she swaps sides. But yeah, we've got a great group of protags here. And while I could pick favorites among them, I'm not gonna, because I love all of them. Actually, wait, no, I take that back. The best member of the team is 808. 808 is the MVP. On the other side of things, we've got the villains in the form of Vandelay's board of executives. And what an entertaining collection of foes we've got here. Vandelay's executives, Korska aside, are all eccentric and cartoonishly evil in their own right. And I mean this in the best way possible. Of course, to start, we've got our main villain, Kale, who paints himself as this charismatic figurehead to the public, but in reality, he's manipulative, self-absorbed, prone to immature outbursts when things don't go his way, and honestly, pretty lazy. Like, the whole reason he's even pushing for the Spectra plot is quite literally because he'd rather mind control customers into buying Vandelay products rather than put in the effort to follow market trends.
Do you have any idea how difficult it is to make something people actually want to buy? It's ridiculously hard! Hey, a new whatever! Well, what color, what model, size, speed, do I need it? All that stress, gone. Because we'll subconsciously make that decision for you.
Okay, place your bets. Which real-world CEO is going to take notes from Kale first? Even his final words before blowing up at the end of the game reflect this mindset of his.
This is just too much work.
Kale's overall both a formidable and entertaining villain, and that's without even mentioning his underlings. We've got other big personality baddies, such as Rekka, head of production and a boisterous wrestler with an aggressive approach to getting the job done.
Attention! Rekka here! That defect was spotted in my building! I'm half hoping none of you chump security get it, so I can rip them apart, piece by piece. There you are, you little punk! You're not getting out of here. You're on lockdown and getting the smackdown!
Then we've got my personal favorite of the executives, Zanzo, head of research and development and an eccentric mad scientist, with no sense of self-control or responsibility as a department head, carelessly throwing his given budget at whatever passion project's on his mind in the moment, regardless of how thinly it stretches his programmers.
All hands on deck! I have an idea that needs all the juice we've got. It doesn't fit in the schedule, so we're gonna have to crunch this one out. Programmers, where are my enemies? Give us more notice. I don't decide when inspiration hits me. Get on my level, and now I take you down. Did you want us to drop the platform? Was that not implied?
Then again, I'm just a sucker for eccentric mad scientist characters, to the surprise of absolutely no one who knows me. We've also got Mimosa, head of marketing and an extravagant diva all about making anything and everything an absolute spectacle, and plays a big part in helping cover up just how malicious Vandelay's gotten as a company.
Welcome to the Vandelay Historical Museum. Explore the journey from its humble roots to the behemoth it's become today.
Oh, she did the announcements herself too. She's so full of herself.
This crowd's in the palm of my hand, and they want to see a real performance. Let's see who they're here for.
And finally, we've got Roquefort, head of finance and a penny pincher who's all about keeping profits coming, meaning Zanzo's careless spending gets especially on his nerves.
Since you continue to avoid my email, Zanzo, I'm making this public. No more budget approvals until this defect fiasco is done with. Full stop.
You dare interrupt my creative process, Roquefort? The gears are turning in my mind with passion.
I don't care about passion. I care about profits.
Ha! Spoken like a true money man.
Enough! Just have security with their orders.
Okay, yeah, on that note, admittedly, there's not as much to Roquefort as the other villains, as he doesn't get a whole ton of screen time compared to the others. Like, each of the other executives get 2 to 3 levels worth of screen time and build up before they're fought at the end of said 2nd or 3rd level, but Roquefort only gets 1 level. Unfortunate, but it is what it is. Point of the matter is, Hi-Fi Rush has a really fun cast of characters, and the writing they're given really helps amplify them. You've probably picked up on it from what I've shown so far, but Hi-Fi Rush goes for a pretty light-hearted comedic tone, like something out of a Saturday morning cartoon, and a pretty high-quality one at that. Granted, not every joke lands in my opinion, but they're paced well enough that even when a joke doesn't work, it's not lingered on, and a better one will be coming around the corner soon enough. And when the jokes do land, they land well.
Can we just one... Sorry, just take a second. I think I know how we can escape.
Really?
Do you trust me?
Are we actually giving them a moment, sir?
Shy, a private elevator.
Her personal lift. I'll reroute it to the hideout.
Oddly enough though, while our heroes and villains have a lot of great interactions, what tends to be the funniest ones are from Vandelay's casual robot workers. You can interact with some of them as you go along, or at the very least listen in on conversations, and a lot of these tend to be really funny.
It's too hot. I can't do it. We aren't even programmed to feel the heat. Fix the generator.
Turned off my leg power unit to focus all my CPU on my coding skills. I'm getting a lot done, but I'm not sure how I'm gonna make it back to my desk.
Hey, everyone, check this out. I'm moving like one of those old Vandelay units. So old school. He's been doing this for hours. Yeah, but we've been watching this for hours. Well, without an in for the concert, this is the best show we'll get.
Same goes with these messages you come across throughout the levels. With these, you get a further taste of what work culture at Vandelay is like, for better or for worse. My favorite of these, though, is one early on in the game that starts a running joke, where a disgruntled employee ends up sabotaging the coffee machines so that they only give decaf. And it's something that comes up from multiple members of the staff later on in the game.
Well, we do have more pressing matters. Might there be anyone here who knows how to fix the coffee machine? It's only giving out decaf, and with this amount of documentation I need to get through... What? Firmware update? Why does the coffee machine need a firmware?
Finally, some peace and quiet. Someone get me a cortado.
Coffee machine's only putting out decaf, sir.
What?
Though don't be mistaken, the game's writing isn't all funny ha-has. It's got some weight and heart to it as well, which it especially shares later on in the game. Two scenes in particular come to mind. First, there's the museum sequence in Track 8, where the team comes across a very skewed version of the company's history, something that leaves Peppermint frustrated. This is where she reveals her relation to Roxanne and Kale, and the heart-to-heart she has with the team here is quite well done.
I know what you probably think. You think...
Who cares? Did you think we wouldn't talk to you anymore? We got this far because of you. We're all here because of you. And I'm here fighting because of what you found. And what you're trying to stop.
Your brother doesn't define who you are.
And this doesn't change anything.
Really?
It only gives us a stronger reason to fight. As friends.
But even more so, the start of Track 11, where Kale traps our heroes, reveals his plans with Spectra, but also in the process undermines Chai to his core. And initially, it gets to him.
Stealing my technology and then calling yourself a rock star? For doing what, exactly?
I don't know what to do. Maybe Kale is right. I'm nothing without this arm.
But it's while attempting to break out that he reflects on everything, on how he's grown and on the friends that he's made that have his back now. On paper, it's a simple, my friends are my power kind of moment, but in execution, I think it works really well for this story. Helps that the level that follows hits hard both set-piece wise and musically, but I'll go more into these elements later on. But yeah, I'm really fond of Hi-Fi Rush's story and character writing. It's got a lot of charm and heart to it. And with the larger prominence of more cynical writing we see in entertainment media nowadays, something that's this genuine and openly wears its heart on its sleeves, corny as it may seem to some, is greatly appreciated.
I don't need a guitar. I am a rock star.
And to think, I haven't even gotten into the gameplay yet. So at its core, Hi-Fi Rush is a hack-and-slash game, akin to something like Devil May Cry. Taking down enemies with stylish and satisfying combat is the name of the game here, metaphorically at least, with largely linear levels to traverse and platform through in between your combat encounters. The big catch in this game's case, though, of course, is the rhythm element. Thanks to the MP3 player now embedded in Chai's body, pretty much everything around him syncs to the beat of the music. The environment, his movement, enemy movement, you name it. As such, the combat is rhythm-based, with all your attacks and the enemy attacks going to the beat, adding a unique twist to the usual hack-and-slash formula.
No problem, guys.
and as someone who loves hack and slashes and quite enjoys rhythm games, yeah, this really ended up clicking with me. Now, something important to point out on that note is that while keeping to the rhythm is handy, the game doesn't outright punish you for not doing so. In order to keep the game available for those who may struggle with keeping on beat, all of Chai's normal attacks automatically sync to the beat no matter what. Timing the button presses perfectly will simply increase the damage output. Granted, there are several techniques at your disposal that will require more precise timing to do, such as using a combo-ending beat hit attack or parrying enemy attacks, but for general attacking, the game doesn't require that specific timing to pull it off, which I think was a great call to keep it more accessible. Now granted, because the nature of Hi-Fi Rush's rhythm-based combos, the skill ceiling isn't quite as high as stuff like DMC, but that's not to undermine how advanced Hi-Fi Rush's combat can get at all. There's still plenty of room to pull off some pretty crazy combos, especially with additional mechanics such as the grappling hook to tether yourself towards enemies, or the assists. Thanks to 808's tech, Chai is able to briefly summon his allies to help in the fight. Peppermint's got blasters for taking out force fields and flying enemies, Macaron's strength makes him able to easily break defenses and destroy Z-shielding, and Korska's batons allow her to stun enemies and take out fires. These assists are useful in general as is, but they also help greatly in combo extending. Though actually on that note, that does lead to one aspect of the combat that I am a bit iffy on, and that's those enemies with force fields or Z-shielding. Peppermint and Macaron are required to destroy those respectively, but with assists having cooldowns after you use them, it sometimes became a bit tedious having to wait for the assist to finish charging before you could do anything to those enemies. It's only a mildly irritating issue in the grand scheme of things though, fortunately, and there are upgrades you can unlock and equip later on that help with this a bit. I will note, the combat doesn't have a lock-on feature, but it does a good job working around that. Several attacks work pretty well for crowd control, and with something like the grappling hook, very rarely would it latch onto a target I wasn't going for. And the combat's only made better once you start purchasing more moves, whether that be new combos for Chai, additional moves for the assists, or the special attacks. As you fight, you build up a meter that allows you to use a special move once it's full. Initially, you can only have one special move equipped at a time, but you're able to buy the ability to have 2 special moves equipped that you can toggle between at any time, which only adds to the possibilities in combat. Or you can be me and dedicate one of those slots to the Super Heal special for your whole playthrough. But yeah, I really enjoy Hi-Fi Rush's combat. Like I said, I already really enjoy this genre as is, and the additional rhythm element adds a fun spin that I find incredibly satisfying to pull off. I'm already the kind of person who will go out of his way to try and time actions to the music in games, so to have a game built around that exact concept, I was 100% on board with it and loved my time with it as a result. But it's not all just hack and slash. The rhythm aspect is emphasized more at several points throughout. Nothing quite as bonkers as rhythm games can often get, but I feel these work well as well. A particular favorite has gotta be these one-on-one clash sequences, where you're required to parry or dodge the same beat set up by your opponent. The timing on these can be tricky, but I found them oh so satisfying to pull off. There's one point in the game in particular where I felt this was best handled, and I'm sure many of you will know what I'm talking about, but I'll get back to that later. Outside of combat, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to be traversing and platforming through Vandelay's many facilities, using much of your combat moveset to help along the way. Doors that require specific combos to unlock, grapple hook sequences, and even your assists will come in handy in clearing a path for you. And like with the combat, the level set pieces go on beat, whether that be moving platforms or the movement of hazards, and so on and so forth. But fortunately, the game gives you many ways to keep track of the beat both in combat and traversal. For example, 808 has a blinker that constantly goes on beat. There's a beat bar you can toggle on and off if you want a more prominent visual signal, and even just parts of the environment bopping along to the beat. It's generally pretty easy to keep track of it. Now on that note, I will admit that the platforming doesn't always feel quite right. The jump and double jump feel a bit heavy and don't cover a ton of horizontal distance, often making it too easy to undershoot jumps, but you at least have the air dash to sometimes help recover. Plus the platforming sections don't tend to get too elaborate, so it doesn't become all too notable of an issue. Now while the traversal portions are a fair bit more linear, there are some points where you can go off the beaten path and find some goodies as a result. Usually gears, which serve as your currency, but also stuff like pieces for health and meter upgrades, those memos I brought up earlier, pieces of graffiti to add to your hideout, or golden statues of Kale for you to go to town on to get a whole ton of gears. And to destroy that smug grin of his. And on that note, since we've talked about general combat and the traversal and platforming, that leaves us with the boss fights. Hi-Fi Rush is one of those rare but wonderful instances where not a single boss in the game is bad, or even just okay. Every one of the boss fights is great. And better yet, they're not all exactly the same structurally either. The first boss of the game is Rekka's head of quality assurance, a massive battle robot known as QA-1 And man, what a great first impression this fight leaves. QA-1 got range, hits hard, but telegraphs his attacks well enough that it's easy to pick up on his patterns and take down this iron giant. All with a strong sense of scale and spectacle, which does a great job of setting the stage for the rest of the game, let alone the other bosses. And that carries over to the second boss, Rekka herself, who takes on Chai in a wrestling arena. And while she's a smaller opponent than QA-1 she arguably hits even harder than him. And that's before mentioning when she uses the wiring beneath the arena, both to electrify her own attacks and the arena as a whole, the latter requiring good use of the grappling hook to avoid. Or when she starts using the piping as weaponry. Admittedly, she's probably my least favorite boss in the game, but this fight's still great. The others are just better. Which brings us to Zanzo, who admittedly doesn't actually have a boss fight, which is unfortunate. Would have loved to have fought this nutcase. But what they do instead is equally fitting and kinda hilarious, because instead of fighting him directly, you spend a good chunk of the level goading him on to continuously up the scale of what he throws at you, continuously draining his budget. Until by the time you get to him and he's preparing to fight you with his magnum opus,
now everyone will see that I am defunded.
Again, would have been nice to have an actual fight against him, but this is an entertaining alternative. And the breaking from the norm doesn't end there, because after him is Corsica, and well, remember what I said earlier about the one-on-one rhythm clash sequences? About there being one point in particular where it's handled best? Yeah, this fight is that point. The battle against Corsica is more like a standoff, with Chai trying to reason with her while she's pretty fed up with everything he's been doing. As such, the fight consists entirely of parry and dodge rhythm sequences, and it fits the fight really well. Leave it to Hi-Fi Rush to give us a boss fight that's, by all technicality, literally just QuickTime events, and yet make it continuously engaging and fun to go through. She's also got one of the best boss themes in the game, but I'll save my talk about the game's music for later on. Next boss we've got is Mimosa, who fittingly makes her fight a total spectacle for the audience watching. She's got strong defenses with her tech, so using your assists is key to taking her down, alongside good parrying timing, something that the Corsica fight certainly would have helped prepare you for. And Mimosa only continues to up the stakes throughout the fight, dimming the lights while her show staff join in on the battle, and then the final phase kicks off with a Space Channel 5-esque back and forth rhythm duel. Side note, I do like how thematically fitting the scenario for this fight is for Chai. The aspiring rock star got to put on a show for a crowd, one that's cheering for him by the end no less. And speaking of the end, let's now talk about the final boss fight against Kale, who starts things off by activating Spectra in Chai's cybernetics, putting him under Kale's control. So how do you fight this? Well, 808 steps up the fight. Yep, you get to play as 808 as you avoid Kale's attacks and scratch at him until you can disable the handheld Spectra device, freeing Chai. From there, you've got a crazy final fight against the mostly mechanical Kale and his insane amount of artillery. Like, this man pretty much becomes Dr. Octopus partway through the fight. And that's not even for the final phase. This fight's wonderful, and the final stretch with all the team getting involved in beating Kale up is the cherry on top of this delicious cake. Now on that note, some of you may have noticed that I missed one of the bosses. Well, that's because I wanted to save talking about him for last. Remember Roquefort, Vandelay's head of finance, who I said felt a bit lacking from the lesser screen time compared to the others? Well, what he lacked in build-up, he made up for in payoff. So So yeah, man takes Wolf of Wall Street to a whole new level. The fight against Roquefort does play more traditionally than something like Corsica or Mimosa did, but man, it's a fantastic fight regardless. Each phase takes you into a different part of Roquefort's office and vault, changing up what he has at his disposal against you in each room, whether that be security lasers in the second phase, or him digging through the coins in the vault to surprise attack you during the third phase. Corsica even gets more directly involved in this fight with a wind-based clash against Roquefort, and it's a really hype fight that plays just as superbly as it looks. Easily my favorite boss in the game. Also, interesting fun fact, it's the only boss in the game Chai does not directly defeat.
But as long as you keep making me mad,
I'm not going anywhere. Time to cash my check by taking you out!
Quarter 3 earnings delivered. Please watch out for falling profits.
And everything I've gone over is just for the main game. Once you've hit the ending, you get access to both a post-game storyline and several additional challenges, such as the gauntlet that is the Rhythm Tower, and the post-launch arcade modes, one of which having you fight with a gradually increasing BPM. This mode in particular gets utterly insane, by the way. I mean, it's fun, and I did manage to beat it, but it scares me. And the other being a special tower, where you start with bare minimum stats and abilities and gradually build them up the longer you go. You also unlock purchasable costumes in the postgame for the entire team. And the point is, there's still a lot to do after this credits roll, so As for the more technical aspects of Hi-Fi Rush, the presentation, the audio, the performance, well, presentation speaks for itself. This game has a phenomenal art direction. The character designs have such vibrant personality oozing from them, even in just the regular enemies. And the environments are nice and vibrant all throughout, even when the game has you going through darker colored areas. This has the visual style of a game from that early to mid 2000s era of gaming, just polished up to a beautiful degree with the power of current day hardware, and I love it. Though on the topic of hardware, this does lead to the one issue I personally had. For a majority of my time with the game, it ran perfectly, but I ended up having a couple hiccups here and there, and anytime they did happen, it would cause the audio to slightly desync. It quickly corrected itself in gameplay, fortunately, but whenever it happened in cutscenes, it was sadly distracting. Now I will note, I am fairly certain this is entirely technical issues on my end. I've got a laptop that's starting to show its age, and again, the game ran fine more often than not. But when those desyncs did happen during cutscenes, they were hard not to notice. So if you intend on playing this on PC like I did, you might want to double check on those system requirements and recommendations. Now on the audio side of things, I think this game nails it. The sound design all throughout has as much punch as it needs, especially with combat. And the voice acting, all top notch. Not a single bad performance in this game. And that finally brings us to the music. One of Hi-Fi Rush's big selling points during its reveal was its use of licensed music. But notably, the game's got an alternate soundtrack known as Streamer Mode, replacing the licensed songs with original songs that capture the same general feel as the licensed pieces. This was done for the sake of streamers and YouTubers to avoid potential copyright claims on their videos. And I think this was a really good call on the developer's part, both for the sake of streamers and YouTubers, but also so that if a licensing issue ends up occurring down the road with one of the licensed songs, they can just replace it with its Streamer Mode counterpart, instead of having to delist the game or prevent it from ever getting re-released. It appears the gaming industry has learned from the Sonic 3 Michael Jackson fiasco. Now for my initial playthrough, I used the licensed soundtrack, but I have listened to the Streamer Mode songs aplenty, and I did go back and get some extra footage with Streamer Mode on. And I gotta say, I think both soundtracks overall work really well for the game as a whole. But then again, I've got no personal connection to the groups included in the licensed soundtrack. I never really listened to any of them before. Having said that though, thanks to this game, I've now lost count of how many times I've listened to Invaders Must Die on my own time. That song slaps. On that note, my two favorite songs from the game's soundtrack, oddly enough, are a pair. one being a licensed track and the other being its streamer mode counterpart. And they're both from my favorite part of the game, track 11. I briefly mentioned it earlier with the part where Chai reflects on everything as he breaks him and his friends out of the trap that they're in, which is already a pretty effective moment. Well, after he succeeds, the team begin their final push towards Kale, and the songs they went with for both soundtracks, well, they got me good. For the licensed soundtrack, it's Whirring by Joy Formidable, and for the streamer mode soundtrack, it's an original song called Surfacing. And both of them really suit this moment of triumph and camaraderie that Chai and his new friends have, emphasized more and more with how the stage plays out. Especially by the end of it, when Cinnamon, a character who had been playing a smaller part compared to the others, gets his moment to shine, complete with being able to control him yourself. And then you take down this behemoth of a hurdle with the power of friendship and just... Man, I love this game. Like I said earlier, Hi-Fi Rush is a game that openly wears its heart on its sleeves, both in the story it tells and the gameplay experience it provides. And I really do love it for that. It's an absolute thrill to play, with a cast of goofy and lovable characters, a beautiful cartoony aesthetic, and not one, but two rockin' soundtracks. All in all, Hi-Fi Rush is amazing. And it's not only easily my favorite game of 2023, it's quickly gone up there as one of my favorite games, period. Thank you, Tango Gameworks, you did a wonderful job. This has been BenjaMage, thank you all for watching, and until the next video, have a nice day, everybody.